I am so excited to be with all of you today. We're up to 49 people joining our webinar, which is fantastic. So thank you for being here today and for giving up your time. I know that this will be a worthwhile session, and because I too can't wait to learn stupid Excel tricks. The title alone is engaging. So at this time, I cannot thank Nikki and Kathy again from SCOE, both attending today and for hosting and for all of the learning that's going to occur. And I'm going to turn it over to Nikki, who will get us started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We are so excited to be here doing stupid Excel tricks. Here's how this is going to work. We are going to place into the chat a few times as we get going a link to a Google folder. In that Google folder is a set of sample data you can download and play along with us as we go through Excel if you would like. You don't have to, but it's an option. The other thing in that folder is a handout that covers all of the stupid Excel tricks we will be talking through today, as well as some instructions on how you implement them. So don't feel like you have to memorize everything we're talking about in this webinar. We've provided step-by-step instructions. So with that, Kathy is going to get us started with our sample data and our first stupid Excel trick.
Hi, everyone. I am going to attempt to do two things at one time, which is share the correct screen and also let you know that you might want to actually download that cheat sheet and just use it as a place to store your own stupid Excel tricks as you discover them. As Nikki said, you could see a different stupid Excel tricks presentation held by 100 different people, and it would be 100 different groups of tricks. There are lots of opportunities to find new ways and better ways to do things with Excel, which is why Nikki and I thought that this would be useful for everyone. So I've got open the navigation and order worksheet that we have in that Google Drive that you can download and practice with later. And we're gonna start easy, okay? The first thing we want to show you is that sometimes you have data that is a lot longer than this example. And what you really want to do is go down to the bottom and see how many rows are there or something similar. So when you want to do that, there's a shortcut to let you quickly navigate either to the left or right end of the sheets or the top or the bottom of the sheet. So if you hold down your control button and use your directional arrows, you will see just how easy this is. If you also hold down the shift, it will select everything, which is super handy. How's that for a stupid trick? Okay, I use this all the time. I started using Excel in like 1988, and we did not have these bells and whistles. So when I learned this trick, I was pretty excited. You can actually reorder your columns much more easily than inserting a column and copying and pasting. You just select your column, works the same with a row, and then you hold down your shift key and pay attention to where my cursor is, because there's a sweet spot right here at the bottom border. And once you see that directional arrow, you can actually drag your column wherever you want it to go, which is very, very handy. Okay, here's another one. So you may notice that in the very bottom right corner, there's a tiny, tiny little square here. And there's a reason for this square. If you drag this square down, it's going to fill in the blank cells with the cell that you just dragged all the way down. And I want you to notice that this was a formula here. So when I dragged it down, it copied the formula in the way it guessed that I wanted to, where it provides a total for every cell. Now I'm going to undo that so I can show you something fairly magical. If you double click on this, it will guess where you want this to populate all the way down your sheet, which is pretty great. All right, let's talk about pasting. Because if all you do is copy and paste, Control-C, Control-V, you're missing a whole lot of pasting that you can do. So let's just, actually, I'm gonna copy this whole set of cells here. If you go to your paste menu, you may have noticed that there are lots of things under this menu. The things that I use all the time are, I want to preserve the source column widths when I'm creating new columns, because I'm anal like that. There's times where you don't want to bring formatting, you just want values, or there's times where you only want to use formatting. Here's my favorite thing though. This little one here will take what you have copied and change the order. So instead of it going across, it will paste it down. And you know, we all get those data sheets that are, we just want to tilt the axis maybe on one thing. And that's just the easiest way to do it. All right. I'm going to stop here. I'm making a change, Nikki, in where I'm going to show you this next trick. So you guys may be confronted with data that looks like this. It's a little unorthodox. We've got lots of different groups of data, all using the same columns. And we want to handle each one of these things a little bit differently. But notice here, like if I want to make a nice little chart, I'm going to want all of my ethnicity categories in alphabetical order, perhaps. And they're not in that order right now. So I'm going to show you how to sort just a portion of a sheet so that you don't mess up anything else you got going on down below. And how you're going to want to do this, you're going to want to very carefully make sure that you select all the column content that's associated with the data that you're sorting. If you don't do this, you're going to only sort one column and all your data is going to be mixed up and wrong, and you might not even notice it. So make sure that you select all of your columns, and then you can right click to get to this very quickly and do a sort. And with your custom sort menu, you're going to see some different options here. First of all, notice that I don't have my data as headers selected. If I made a mistake and I would like to have my headers identified, I can do that. But in this case, I do not. I tell it what column I would like to sort it by. And only these columns and rows are sorted. So now I've got my nice alphabetical categories here. All right, I'm going to go back here. All right, so here we have just some very simple data, but we have a lot of it. And maybe what I want to do is just very quickly see how many rows I have under the country France. So here's another trick. Whenever you get a worksheet open, you do not know what the person who was working on it before may have done with this filter function. Don't do a rookie mistake. Always come to data and filter. Make sure that there are no filters active. And you can see that that's the case because this clear is grayed out. You want to make sure there's no filters active so that when you do your counts, you're going to get the right count. So in order to see the little drop-down menus here, you just click on this filter. And then you're able, first of all, to quickly see all the unique values that are in that column. Even if you have, 8 million rows, it won't matter. I can see I forgot to move my telephone. That was I got the dog outside. I turned off my ringer on my cell phone, but all right. So all you have to do here is select the values that you want to count. And it filters it out for you. Now I end up using this a lot for just really quick counts by looking at the status bar. So I don't know if you can see me wiggling my cursor down here, but then it very quickly just tells me I have 18 rows. If I'm doing things and I like say I copy this, it totally disappears here. Don't worry about that. Because you can go up here to your filter area and reapply and you can get your little count back, right? Like this. So you're able to do filters on multiple columns to really dial down, and just when you're analyzing data and you might want to just get an idea of what's in there and how the data relates, that is how you do it. I always clear my filters when I am done using them, because that prevents mistakes later. And I won't save my worksheet until I've cleared the filter for that reason. Your practices may vary. All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Nikki to do some more tricks.
Okay, we are going to do a whole section on managing what data is showing. And we are going to start with how to create a drop-down list. So in this case, I have this column here. I can make it a little bigger, where I want to have a drop-down that I have to select from for the continent. And on my next sheet over, I have the values that I would like to use in that drop-down. So what I can do is I can select all of column C, and then I'm going to hold my control key and unselect my header row. I don't want to apply my drop-down to my header row. I'm going to go to the data tab of the ribbon. I'm going to come over here to data validation, and I'm going to say I want this to be a list. And when it asks me for my source, I'm going to blank that out. I'm going to click on that little arrow, come over here and highlight my source. Now I can select just these 6 cells that I have filled in, or I can select some blank ones if I think I will add more to it later. But for now, I'm just going to select these 6. I'll come back and click the little arrow again, say okay. And now over here, I have a drop-down list for these cells. The nice thing about this is in my data validation setup, I can allow it to hold to only these values, and I can customize the error message that people see when they try to insert something that's not one of those values. So it's a great way to limit what people can enter into a cell from a drop-down list in Excel. Another way that we can manage what data is showing is we can highlight our duplicate values, which is very different than removing them. Maybe we just want to see them, but we don't want to delete them out. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to highlight column G on my Manage What Data Shows sheet. I'm going to go to the Home tab of the ribbon, Conditional Formatting, highlight cells, and I'm going to select Duplicate Values. And the value is duplicate, and it defaults to this red fill, red text. You can customize that if you want to. I'm fine with red, so I'm just going to say okay, and it will highlight for me everything that is a duplicate. Now I could go in and do what Kathy just showed us, which is sort my sheet by either the email addresses or by the cell color if I wanted to group all the duplicates together and deal with them. But this is just at a glance an easy way to see what is a duplicate. Other ways to kind of monitor what data of yours is showing is to freeze panes. An easy one is to freeze the top row so it stays in place while you're scrolling around. This is done on the View tab of the ribbon. I mean, that makes sense, right? We're talking about what our view is. So I've highlighted my first row. I come up here to freeze panes, and I can freeze the top row. When I scroll, the top row stays in place. I'm going to unfreeze this really quick so I can show you that we can also, if we so choose, freeze the first column. So that way, when I scroll to the side, that first column stays in place. And freeze this really quick. But let's say for some reason, I wanted to freeze a couple rows and a couple columns. It doesn't make sense for this data, but we're going to pretend it does. I'm going to click on, let's say, cell C8, and I am going to freeze panes. And you see it's drawn a line above that cell and to the left of that cell. So now when I scroll, only parts of my sheet will move depending on which direction I'm scrolling. So you can customize what's frozen and what's not frozen by selecting one cell and freezing panes. This next one is my absolute favorite. I think I broke Kathy's brain when I shared this one with her. How many times have you guys ever said, oh, these columns all belong together and I don't really need them all the time, so I'm going to hide them. And then when you need them, you're going to unhide them. And then when you don't need them, you're going to hide them again. What you can do is you go to the data tab of the ribbon. You've selected all the columns you want and you group them. And then you can hide them and unhide them with a click. I know, coolest thing ever. I learned it from TikTok. Then we want to focus on CDS codes. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us deal with CDS codes quite often. One decently easy way to make your CDS codes not look like this mathematical formula thing is to right click and you format your cells and you tell Excel, no, this is a number with no decimal places. And that will work. However, if your CDS codes have leading zeros, and I'm looking at you, counties 1 through 9, that won't work for you. It will drop the leading zero. So what you guys can do is, again, right click, format cells. Can you guys see my pop-up on top? Okay, good, just checking. You're gonna come down here to custom. You're gonna click on this 0 and you are gonna enter 13 more zeros. For a total of 14 zeros, because that's how long our CDS code is. And that will also do the same thing while preserving leading zeros. Another cool thing that we can do in Excel is split out data in our columns. There's a couple ways we can do this. So in this case, I have names that are last name, comma, first name. I could highlight my column, come to the data tab of the ribbon. I could go text to columns. I could say this is delimited data and it's delimited by a comma. And when I do that, everywhere there's a comma, it's going to split my data across my columns for me. It works really well when you have a nice delimiter. You can also do it at fixed width and cut your CDS codes. But one of my favorite things that Excel is decently recent. Excel has gotten smart. So if I type the last name myself, Williams, and then I come down here and I'm going to do Control E, Excel's going to catch on. And if I come type the first name of Nova and I Control E, Excel's going to catch on. And it's the same kind of thing for like addresses. If I add a column here, for example, and I just want the address, not the street name. So it's 8540, Control E. Nope, it doesn't have enough yet to go on. Oh, it kind of does. It's somewhat understood it. Some of them you'll have to clean up, but it's an amazing way to get Excel to kind of do that work for you. All right, Kathy, I'm going to pass it on to you to do some summations.
Awesome. I did want to just note that data you were looking at is public data that was pulled off the licensing site for the state. So you weren't looking at anything personal there. We've made extra sure that all the data here is free to be seen by all. Okay, we're going to do some math here, except we're not doing the math because that's what Excel does. I don't know if you guys know about auto sum, but it's this wonderful little shortcut. Now, Miss 1988 Excel user here was used to the days when you had to manually do it. And so when they added auto sum, which is probably, 20 years ago, I didn't notice. But when I did find out about it, I was pretty thrilled. So here, up here, if you're in your home menu, and there's a little editing section in your menu, you go to auto sum. Excel will make a most educated guess about what you are trying to sum. And it works whether you're doing a row or a column. Now, you can also do, and I have to always make sure I'm pressing the right button. If you do Alt equals, it will do the same thing. So maybe I want to Alt equals everything here. Look at that. Isn't that nice? And then we already learned about our little square here. Now I suddenly have some beautiful totals. So that's always nice. Okay, let's move on to formulas. I hope you guys are into formulas like I am. We run into formulas all the time, right? And we know that Excel can get a little bit squirrely when you start copying and pasting. So when you're doing your checks on your data, one way you can make sure that everything is calculating using the columns that you're expecting it to is go ahead and click on your cell that has a formula and just stick your cursor in there. And it just magically kind of gives you a visual cue of what columns are being used in the calculation. It's a really nice way to just double check and make sure that you're all in the same row and the columns that you're expecting are the ones that are in the formula. It will just help you avoid pain later. Oh, Nikki, am I turning it over to you already? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Let me share my screen. All right. Can you guys see my screen again? We good? Okay. We are going to talk about formulas, but specifically using dollar signs with our formulas. Let me zoom in again. So if I wanted to calculate a percent, right? I've got a count of my participants by gender, and I want to turn this into a percent. I can very easily say my percent is my count divided by my total. That works. But if I was going to drag this down, I'm going to get a whole lot of arrows, because what it's doing is it's dragging B2 down one value, but it's also dragging B5 down one cell. And there's nothing here for it to calculate with. So I want to tell Excel that, yes, I want the numerator to change as I drag it around, but I want the denominator to stay the same. And I do that with dollar signs. And the shortcut for this is your F4 key. So if I hit my F4 key, it's going to put dollar signs in. And if I keep hitting it, it's going to toggle through where those dollar signs are. How this works is wherever there is a dollar sign, it will not move that row or column. So if I put two dollar signs, one in front of the row or column and one in front of the row, and drag it, it's going to keep that exact value, B5. If I have a dollar sign in front of the B, but not the 5, it'll keep it column B, but will move 6, 7, 8 as I drag it around. If I have a dollar sign in front of the 5, but not the B, it'll keep the B, but will move the 5 as I drag it around, and so on and so forth. So in this case, I just want it locked onto this one cell. I don't want it to drag anywhere. Now, when I drag this around, I drug it down a cell, so it moved the numerator down, but it kept my denominator in the same spot. And same here, it moved my numerator down, kept my denominator in the same spot. So that's how we can use those dollar signs to manipulate what we're dragging around. And I will show you a better example of that in just a little bit when we get to survey data. The next cool trick, I learned this from Kathy, and you guys, it is just the coolest thing. If you want to see what your formulas are instead of the values associated with them, you hit the control key and then the little tilde key, which is next to the 1 in your number row, and it changes your whole sheet to show your values instead of your formulas instead of your values. And you can just use that key back and forth to toggle. It's really handy if you need to look at all the formulas your sheet is using in a quick glance. All right. I'm seeing lots of kudos in the chat. I love it. Okay, some other advanced stupid functions, and these are kind of all over the place, but they're the ones that Kathy and I use most commonly. Proper, lower, and upper are great for renaming columns. So let's say I wanted my columns to have proper punctuation. I can say equals proper, and then go find my cell, and it will capitalize everything. And again, if I double click that, it will do it for all my cells. Same thing with upper and lower. So my cell over here is all caps. Maybe I want it all lowercase. Equals lower. And then let's do the opposite. Equals upper. So just easy ways to recapitalize or uncapitalize, especially if you have like column headers that you're using in a chart or things like that. It's just an easy way to change the case of your letters. We talked about the sum function, right? You can do the official equals sum of, and then grab your cells. But as Kathy showed earlier, you can also alt equals. It does the same thing. And it's pretty intuitive about where you want it to sum. We can also do the if function. And if is a cool feature that, again, is really customizable. In this case, I've cheated and I have my formula all typed out. So you guys don't have to watch me type. But what I'm telling Excel is if cell B2 equals the United States of America, display America, else display not America. So if I change this back into a formula, not just text, and then I double click it down, it's going to do exactly that. Now, you can't have typos. Like if one of these United States of America was mistyped, it wouldn't work. That's why drop-downs work great if these were a drop-down menu. But if functions allow you to say, if this, then here's what I want you to do if it's true, and here's what I want you to do if it's false. That can be combined with a couple of other functions to very, very easily calculate your survey data. So the count A function, I'm going to use really quick, if I can spell, count A, and I'm going to say for, these values in my sheet, that's going to count the non-blank cells. So how many do I have? How many responses do I have? We can also set up a count if function that makes survey analysis pretty easy. And you guys have this in your sheet. And the cool thing is that you can just take this and use it with your own survey data. So the way this sheet is set up, it's called the calc survey data, is that if you paste your survey data into A, B, and C, all of this stuff over here, I'm waving at my screen like you can see my hand, all of this stuff over here will automatically populate for you, including the column headers. So if I were to just plunk new data in here, this will all update. So long as your data follows the strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree format. But here's how this works. I told my Excel that I want to count if all of column A equals, and then I've picked my value that I have over here, strongly agree. And it's going to count them. How many in column A are strongly agree? And then I can go in and I can add my dollar signs before I drag it around, if I would like. Because what I want it to do is I want to be able to drag it down. So I want the 2 to be free to turn into a 3 and a 4 and a 5, but I need the G to stay because when I drag it sideways, I don't want it to move off of column G as my values. So I am going to put the dollar sign in front of the G only. Then when I drag it down, you'll see that this is now looking for column A and agree. This one is looking for column A and disagree. But if I drag it sideways, this one is now looking for column B and agree, which it should. And this one is looking for column C and strongly disagree, which it should. Then I've auto summed each of these numbers, so I know how many people responded. And then down here, there's another formula that says what percentage of that total is strongly agree, or just regular agree, and so on and so forth. Again, these add up to 100%, so I know I'm all set there. And then what I've done is I've had it also add up the strongly agree and agree in case you bundle your positive responses versus negative instead of delineating out strongly agree and agree. I know that's a lot. The cool thing is you have this sample data file. So you can come in here, you can click around, you can see how it's all set up. And like I said, if you just plunk your strongly agree to strongly disagree data in columns A through C, everything will update for you. So I'm going to take column C just as an example and put it right on top of column A. And not only did my values change, but the title and H changed too. So I know exactly what column is where. But this uses, again, that count if. It uses the dollar signs for the dragging piece of it. And it's all there for you to use. You could even, if you wanted, make a copy of this data. So I copy my worksheet. And then you can change this to yes and no if your values are different in your data. Or you can change it, whatever values you happen to have in your data that you need to count and percentage and all that, you can just change that up and the sheet will continue to work for you. I know that was a hefty one, but it's one of my favorites. I have these sheets set up for like almost all the values I use in my survey responses, and then it's so easy. All right, Kathy, I think you were doing left, right, and mid.
And then I lost my mute button. So guys, we're gonna look at more functions. And just as an aside, if any of you use a tool like Power BI, for example, a lot of these formulas are gonna be the same in Power BI or very, very similar. So this is not wasted learning if you use Excel sometimes, but you also use Power BI. One other thing I want to mention is, as a practice, when I get and I need to massage a lot of data, we all get a lot of hot mess data that we need to clean up. I do not delete my source columns ever. They can stay there in all their dirty glory. All the functions that I use to clean my data, I put in a separate column, because God forbid I make a mistake and overwrite my data, like super confident me. I'm older and wiser now. I don't do that anymore, because that is a way to make a pretty brutal mistake. So take it from me, add new columns, use functions to clean your data, and you will be a happy person. So let's go back to these CDS codes are killing me, because so often I need to split these up, especially if I'm creating some Power BI visuals and I want to make different selectors for counties and districts and whatnot. So there's 3 different functions you can use. There's probably a lot more methods. One is to take a certain number of characters from the left-hand side of a string. And it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to say, I want the left, and I can't remember now what comes first, this or 2, the text. And I just want the first 2, because we all know in CDS codes, those first 2 digits are your county code. And that gives you, flux off the first 2 digits. I messed up my formatting here. Let me correct that. See again about making mistakes. Okay, that looks better. There's also a write function, because if I want the school code, I know that the last 7 digits are going to be the school code. So I'm going to do the exact same thing here, but I'm going to tell it I want to clip those 7 characters off. So then the hard part is, okay, great. What about the middle? Well, that is where you're going to use your substring. That is going to be and first you're going to want to tell it where to start. This takes a little practice. It happens to be the 3rd character. And then you're going to tell it how long of a splice to make. And I know that my district codes are 5 characters long. So after much practice, I don't have to think too hard about those numbers anymore, because I've done it so often. But what I always do when I do a mid is just manually in my head do it, make sure I got all the math right before I proceed. And then, of course, we can just duplicate this all the way down the sheet with our beautiful little square. Okay, so there's more that we can do to massage data. Sometimes we get all the parts of the CDS code, but what we really want is the entire CDS code. Because it doesn't matter, whatever we get is not what we need, so we have to actually make it happen. So one way we can do that, this is pretty easy to do, is you're just going to tell it to string all of these columns together. So I'm going to use my mouse because it tends to make it more clear. So I'm going to ask it to do this cell and this cell and this cell. And it puts it all back together. Now pretend like this was, I don't know, like a salutation and a first name and a last name. You can do a little bit more. You can actually put a blank space in between here and format this any way that you need on the other end. So sky's the limit when it comes to massaging data to make it look the way that you want it. All right, what's next? I think we're going back to a different worksheet. Here it is. All right. So another thing we often need to do are flipping numbers, making them a little bit simpler for our audience. A lot of time that's rounding. Sometimes it's just clipping off a part of a number. So it depends on what you need. So there's two ways to do it. Let's do the rounding first. As you might guess, oops, you have to spell it right, or else it won't work. The function's called round. It wants to know what number you want to round, and it wants to know how many digits you want to round to. So that's a pretty boring round. Let's double click here. Let's change that to 1 and see what it does. So here it's rounding to 2 digits and rounding up. I'm going to change that to 1 and just see what it looks like. Okay, that all makes sense to me. So what's the difference with the truncation? Let's check. So if I instead truncate this value, it's literally just going to lop off the ends of the number. I'm not really sure when I would use this, but it's useful to point out because sometimes you're shopping around for a function that's going to do what you want it to do, and you just really want to make sure you get the right function, or else it will do things that you're not expecting. All right, what do we have next? Ooh, let's look at some charts. You guys probably make a lot of Excel charts. So I already showed you some of the sorting functions, but that's not what we're going to do here. So pretend like your boss has made you attend a bunch of trainings about chart formatting, and you've got some rules that you now have, some preferences for how you like the charts in your reports to show. They're probably not going to look like this, spoiler alert. But pretend like this is the style that I have set for charts for my organization. I don't want to have to format this every time I make a chart. That will drive me insane, but you don't have to do that because there are chart templates. So once you get your chart looking great, and let's just say, hate grid lines, not doing it. I want to just make a couple of changes to this. Sorry, guys. And then I'll show you why this is so great. All right, so say this is how I want my charts to look. You can right click on that chart. You can click Save as Template. And when you do that, you're actually, it's a file. It's a file format that you're going to save to wherever you save your files, whether that's, OneDrive or is probably going to be on your hard drive. And that chart is going to be there. So I'm going to save it with that stellar descriptive chart 1.crtx name. So once you have that saved, then you can use it again and again. Now, remember when I was talking about pasting and different kinds of pasting you can do? You can also like get your chart the way you like it and copy it. And then go to your other chart that's not quite how you like it. And when you go to paste, you'll see there's a paste special. And you're going to select formats. Don't know why it's looking like this. Okay, there. You can choose formats and click OK. And it will magically paste what you have decided you want your charts to look like. So that's two different options that should save you some time.
Both
I don't know.
work great for small multiples.
Right. Yes.
Lifesavers.
If you're ever doing small multiples, there's nothing more frustrating than fine-tuning charts for 6 hours in a day. All right. So we've done that. So let's look a little bit more deeply. You guys ready to go really fringe here? This is how anal things get in my world. Sometimes I have really specific wants for how my numbers are formatting. You can do some crazy stuff with number formatting in Excel. So if you go into format data labels, you are probably used to seeing this. You can go down into the number, and typically we're just going to like change the category and ignore the rest of what's here. We might mess around with the decimal places. Well, this format code, this hides some pretty substantial superpowers here. In the cheat sheet, the Word document that we have provided for you, there's a very detailed explanation, which is kind of a summary of Microsoft's long and not always useful help text. But this format code string actually will let you format one way for positive numbers, one way for negative numbers, zeros, and if you have text in your label, also a different way for text. So let me just give you an example of how this works. So pretend like I would like to make negative values red and hide any labels that say 0. I pre-type just like Nikki. I hate typing when people are watching. It's kind of like my dog won't eat if anyone's watching him. So I'm copying this so that I don't have to do that. So I will explain the pieces of this formula after I paste it. So the first portion, and it's split by semicolons. I see already that it pasted something I didn't want. This first portion here is for the positive numbers. Then nobody can see this without a microscope, but there is a semicolon here. And then the next portion deals with negative numbers. And I'm saying, hey, I want those to be red. Otherwise, it's just a standard percent. At the end are 2 semicolons. This just tells it the third spot is for zeros. I want nothing there. And that's what that second semicolon is saying. It's like, don't display the zeros. So I'm going to click this add button, but what I want you to do is look at this chart while I do this. So now you can see kind of that I have one negative number and it's now red. The 0 is gone and my positive numbers are my standard color. Now, what I should do to make it super clear is see what that does. Then I put a negative, a little hyphen in front of it. You can really tell it's a negative number. You don't have to be a mind reader. So that's just an example of what you could do depending on your needs with a chart. There's a lot of power hidden in there that unless you're digging around in Microsoft's help, you might not know about. So Nikki, it looks like we have a little bit more time to go into conditional formatting. Would you like to go and do that?
Sure thing.
Okay.
All right, you can see my screen?
Yes, just bigger.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go to this sheet because there's lots of data in this sheet. We talked about duplicate values earlier, and we used a conditional format to highlight our duplicate values. But there is so much that you can do with conditional formatting. So where do I want to start? Okay, conditional formatting is found on the Home tab of the ribbon. It is right here. Let's just do a quick run through. We can highlight cells that are greater than or less than a certain value of our choosing, that are between certain values, that are exactly equals to, or text that contains. So for example, if I wanted to pick out this licensee, and I wanted to know how many times it was shown in column D, I can highlight cells that are equal to that exact value, right? However, if I wanted to see, I don't know why I would ever need to see this, but how many of my licensees had the word academy in their name, I can highlight cells that contain the text academy. And I'll turn these green. Right? If you have a lot of data that you're sharing with people, and we know Stephanie Evergreen says just never dump a table of data on your folks. Sometimes you have to put your tables in the appendices of your report. So if you ever wanted to, highlight your values that were a certain number, facility capacity, for example, on this sheet, I want to know how many are greater than 30, and I'm going to fill those with green. Actually, let's say greater than 100. And then in the same column, how many are less than 25? And then how many are between 26 and 99? I'll turn those yellow. No, I guess I should do 25 and 100, shouldn't I? Because it's between. And there we go. Now I have color-coded data. It's just one of the ways that we can do this, right? One of my favorite conditional formats, let me remove all of this. So I'm gonna clear rules from my entire sheet. I do understand that you can very easily turn your Excel sheet into a table. And once you've done that, all these automatic table formatting options exist. But sometimes we want to keep our data as an Excel sheet and still have it color coded. My favorite ever is a custom formula that will highlight every other row a different color. So conditional formatting, highlight cells, you come down to more rules. We're going to use a formula. The formula is in your cheat sheet. So I'm just going to copy paste it. It's equals mod as in modify row empty set comma 2 equals 1 in the cheat sheet. Don't memorize what I just yelled out. Sorry, let's try that again. Then you click the format button. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to pick a fill color. I'm going to pick this blue. And it is going to highlight every other row for me. And if I then go in and delete a bunch of rows, the every other row will stay. If I add a row, the every other row will stay. Whereas if you're doing it manually, you're constantly having to highlight and rehighlight and unhighlight and rehighlight every time you move things around. So it's just a very easy way to color code portions of your sheet. Now there's more that it can do, right? It talks about the top 10% or the bottom or between like above average or below average. You can get into data bars and color scales like heat maps on your tables. There's so much you can do with conditional formatting. This is literally just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, I think we covered a lot, and I'm sure there are some questions floating out there. So let's get over to you guys' questions. And if you have questions or need to see something again, we do have a little bit of time to cover all of that.
All right, hi. Thank you for this. This is very, very helpful. I'm just wondering, since we do have a lot of, if we work with schools and districts that are Google users, how many of these translate to Google Sheets?
A lot of formulas do translate over to Google. There's only a couple I found that don't, and they were really complex, like nested formulas, right? Like an index within a match within a VLOOKUP kind of a thing. And for the most part, it's pretty similar. So I would say try it. If you know, go in and try your truncating and your rounding and your whatever. Conditional formatting does work a little bit different in Google, but I found, you know, I can write formulas pretty much the same way. You're just writing a formula. So I'd say try it, and if it works, awesome. And if not, you're gonna have to find a Google workaround for it. Excellent question.
Thank you.
So very basic question. In the very beginning, you were highlighting whole columns. And then I couldn't catch, what was that key command that you used to unhighlight the header, if that makes sense, but it left the rest?
Yes, the control key. So here, I'll share my screen again real quick. If I grab the entire column, like I click on the whole column, it'll highlight all of it, and then hold my control key while I select any cells that I don't want it to capture.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can do the reverse, right? If you don't have a ton of data, I can click my columns and hold the control key and select certain columns. In this case, that would take forever to select all however many rows worth, but it works both ways. It will select only specific or unselect only specific ones. I think we're good to wrap up.
I think so as well. And so let's just give a round of applause to Nikki and Kathy. This was not stupid. This was practical, hands-on, and relevant training. And so I hope that you found it as relevant as I did and timely. When you close your Zoom, it will launch a very brief survey. We appreciate your feedback, and it will help us engage in future topics that we can have as webinars. So please continue to do that. And as always, I want to thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to note that our conference is coming up November 13th through the 15th. And you will be the first to know that one of our keynotes confirmed is Shane Safir, the author of Street Data. So I'm very excited. We're very excited to bring her to our conference. I'm not telling you which day yet. That'll be a secret. But hopefully you can join us at our annual conference. That'll be held once again at the Disneyland Hotel. And if there aren't any further questions, again, thank you, Nikki and Kathy, for presenting such fantastic tidbits. Thank you, Jamie, for hosting, and all of our other CERA board members that were on the Zoom. Thank you, and we hope you have a fantastic day. See you in September for our next webinar. More details to come.